An old man walked into a flower shop and asked for the smallest bouquet they had. But when a biker overheard why, he froze. Because some reasons don't just break your heart, they stay with you long after the moment is over. The bell above the door chimed softly as the old man stepped inside, moving with careful, deliberate steps like each one had to be negotiated with his body first. His coat worn thin at the elbows, his shoes scuffed in a way that spoke of years rather than neglect, and his hands trembling just enough to notice, but not enough to stop him from reaching the counter, where Emily stood arranging fresh roses that still carried the scent of morning dew. She looked up, offering the kind of polite smile you give strangers, but it faltered slightly when she really saw him, not because there was anything wrong, but because there was something fragile about him, something that made you instinctively lower your voice without knowing why. "Excuse me," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "What's the smallest bouquet you have?" Emily blinked, caught off guard by the question, because people usually asked for the biggest, the brightest, something meant to impress or celebrate, not the smallest, not something that barely took up space. But she nodded and turned, selecting a tiny arrangement of 3 white daisies tied together with a thin ribbon, simple and almost modest compared to the vibrant display surrounding it. "This is the smallest we make," she said gently, placing it on the counter. It's perfect." The old man interrupted softly, his eyes resting on the flowers not with joy, but with something heavier, something that made Emily pause as if she'd stepped into a moment she didn't fully understand. In the corner of the shop, leaning against a display of potted plants, a biker watched the exchange without meaning to, his leather jacket creaking slightly as he shifted his weight, arms crossed, his presence filling the space in a way that contrasted sharply with the quiet fragility of the old man. He had come in for something quick, something practical, but now he found himself unable to look away, drawn in by a feeling he couldn't quite name. "How much is it?" the old man asked, reaching slowly into his coat pocket. And when Emily told him, he nodded, as if confirming something to himself, before pulling out a small handful of coins and placing them carefully on the counter one by one. Nickels, dimes, pennies, each one set down with precision, as though the act itself mattered just as much as the purchase. And Emily's heart tightened as she realized what was happening, her instinct kicking in before he could finish counting. "It's okay," she said softly, gently pushing the coins back toward him. "You can have it." But the old man immediately shook his head, a quiet firmness in his refusal that surprised her. "No," he said, "I can't take charity. Not for this." His gaze returned to the bouquet, lingering there as if it held more weight than its size suggested. And the biker felt something twist in his chest at the way the man said those last words, like there was a story behind them that hadn't been told yet. Without thinking, the biker stepped forward, pulling out his wallet and placing cash on the counter. "I got it," he said, his voice rough but not unkind, and both Emily and the old man looked up, surprised by his sudden involvement. "You don't have to do that," the old man said, his pride still intact despite everything. But the biker just shrugged slightly. "I know," he replied. "I want to." There was a pause, the kind that stretches just long enough to mean something, before the old man nodded slowly, accepting the gesture not as charity, but as something closer to kindness. "Thank you," he said, his voice softer now, almost grateful in a way that didn't ask for anything more, and he picked up the small bouquet carefully, holding it like it mattered more than anything else in the room. The biker watched him turn toward the door, something unsettled in his chest, something that didn't sit right, and before he could stop himself, he spoke. "Who are they for?" The question hung in the air, simple but loaded, and the old man stopped mid-step, his back still to them as if he were deciding whether to answer or just keep walking. And for a moment it seemed like he might leave it alone, like whatever reason he carried was too personal to share with strangers. But then he turned slightly, just enough for his voice to carry back into the shop. "My daughter," he said quietly, and there was something in the way he said it. Not just sadness, but something deeper, something heavier, that made the biker go completely still. It wasn't just the words, it was the weight behind them, the kind that didn't come from a simple story or an easy explanation. And as the door opened, and the bell chimed again, the old man stepped out into the fading light, leaving behind a silence that felt louder than anything that had been said, and the biker stood there for a second longer than necessary, staring at the door as if the answer he'd just heard wasn't enough, as if there was something more waiting just beyond it, something he wasn't sure he was ready to understand, but couldn't walk away from either. The biker stepped out of the flower shop a few seconds later, the bell still echoing faintly behind him. But now the world outside felt different, quieter somehow, like everything had been turned down just enough for him to hear his own thoughts. And he spotted the old man a short distance ahead, walking slowly along the sidewalk, one careful step at a time. The small bouquet clutched gently in his hands as if it were something far more fragile than flowers. For a moment, the biker considered letting him go, telling himself it wasn't his business, that people had their own lives, their own reasons. But something about the way the man had said, "my daughter," kept replaying in his head, and before he could talk himself out of it, he started walking. "Hey," he called out, not too loud, just enough to reach him. The old man paused, turning slightly, his expression calm but a little surprised. "Mind if I walk with you?" the biker asked, shoving his hands into his jacket pockets like he didn't care either way. The old man studied him for a brief moment, then gave a small nod. "I don't mind." They fell into step beside each other, their pace naturally matching, slow and unhurried. And for a while neither of them spoke, the silence stretching between them, but not uncomfortable. Just heavy, like it was waiting for the right words to fill it. The biker glanced down at the bouquet, then back at the man. "Your daughter," he said finally, keeping his voice casual. "She's sick?" The old man shook his head gently. "No." That answer lingered in the air, incomplete, and the biker frowned slightly, trying again. "Then what? Hospital or something?" Another pause. The old man's grip on the flowers tightened just a little, enough for the biker to notice. "She's in a care facility," he said quietly. "Been there for a while now." The biker nodded slowly, processing that, but something still didn't add up. "She gonna be okay?" he asked, and this time the old man didn't answer right away. They reached a crosswalk, the signal flashing red, and they stopped together, waiting, the city moving around them in a blur of noise and motion that felt distant compared to the stillness between them. "No," the old man said finally. The word was simple, but it carried weight. Final, unchangeable. The biker swallowed, his jaw tightening. "What happened?" The old man stared ahead as the light changed, then stepped forward, crossing the street slowly, the biker following close beside him. "Alzheimer's," he said, almost under his breath, like the word itself was something fragile. The biker's steps faltered for just a second before he caught up again, his chest tightening in a way he didn't expect. "Late stage," the old man added. They walked another few steps in silence before he continued, his voice steady but worn. "At first, it was little things. She'd forget where she put her keys, miss appointments, call me by my brother's name sometimes. We laughed about it, you know? Thought it was just getting older." He gave a faint, hollow smile. Then it got worse. The biker didn't interrupt, didn't push, just listened, because something told him this wasn't something the man talked about often. "She started forgetting conversations we had just hours before," the old man went on. "Then days. Then weeks. One morning, I came over and she didn't remember I had been there the night before." His voice wavered slightly, but he kept going. "Doctors said it would progress. Said there was nothing we could do but make her comfortable." He let out a slow breath. "You think you're prepared for something like that, but you're not." The biker stared straight ahead, his throat tight, feeling something heavy settle in his chest. "When did she stop recognizing you?" he asked quietly. The old man's steps slowed, almost stopping. "About a year ago," he said. "I walked into her room, and she looked at me like I was a stranger." He swallowed hard, asked me who I was. The biker felt that hit him like a punch, his hands curling into fists inside his pockets. "What did you say?" The old man gave a small, broken smile. "I told her I was someone who cared about her." He looked down at the bouquet again. It seemed easier than watching her struggle to understand something her mind couldn't hold on to anymore. They turned onto a quieter street now, lined with trees that cast long shadows across the pavement, the late afternoon sun dipping lower, and the old man continued, his voice softer now, almost like he was talking more to himself than to the biker. "She used to love flowers," he said. "Every Sunday, I'd bring her some. They'd bouquets at first, roses, lilies, whatever looked the brightest. I thought maybe something familiar would spark a memory." He shook his head gently. It didn't. The biker glanced at the small bundle of daisies. "So you started bringing less?" The old man nodded. She'd take them, smile for a moment, then forget they were even in her hands. Sometimes she'd set them down before I even sat down next to her. His voice cracked slightly. "One time, she asked the nurse who had left them there, right in front of me." The biker exhaled slowly, trying to steady something inside himself that didn't want to be steady. "That's rough," he muttered, the understatement hanging awkwardly between them. The old man let out a quiet breath that almost sounded like a laugh, but there was no humor in it. You get used to it, he said. Or at least, you learn to live with it. They walked in silence for a few steps before the biker asked the question that had been building in his chest since they left the shop. Then why keep bringing them, he said. If she doesn't remember, if it doesn't change anything, the old man stopped walking. Slowly, he turned to face him, and for the first time, the biker really saw it. The exhaustion, the grief, the kind of quiet heartbreak that didn't show up all at once but built over time until it became part of you. Because I remember, the old man said, his voice barely above a whisper. The words hit harder than anything else he had said. I remember who she is, he continued. I remember the little girl who used to pick daisies in the backyard and run inside with dirt on her hands, smiling like she'd found treasure. His eyes filled with tears, but he didn't look away. I remember her first day of school, how she cried because she didn't want to leave me, and how I promised I'd be right there when she got back. He swallowed, his voice breaking now. I remember every birthday, every laugh, every moment that mattered. The biker felt his chest tighten, something sharp and unfamiliar pressing behind his ribs. She may not know me anymore, the old man said, but she's still my daughter. A long silence followed, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. Then the old man looked down at the bouquet again, his expression softening into something almost peaceful. And I don't want her to be alone in a world she doesn't understand. The biker blinked hard, looking away for a second as he tried to steady himself. That's why the smallest bouquet, he said quietly, more to himself than anything. The old man nodded. She only holds them for a few seconds, he said. I figured that's all she needs. And this time, the biker didn't have anything to say at all, because for the first time in a long time, he felt completely, utterly still. By the time they reached the care facility, the sun had nearly disappeared, leaving behind a dim, fading light that made everything look softer than it really was, and the building stood quiet at the end of the street, clean and well-kept, but carrying that unmistakable stillness that comes with places where time feels different, slower, heavier, stretched between moments that don't always connect the way they should. The old man paused at the entrance, adjusting his grip on the small bouquet like he was steadying himself for something far bigger than the walk they had just taken, and the biker stood beside him, unsure now if he was intruding or if he had already crossed that line the moment he chose to follow. But before he could say anything, the old man pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air changed immediately, cooler, quieter, filled with the faint scent of antiseptic and something floral meant to mask it. And a nurse behind the front desk looked up with a gentle, practiced smile that softened when she recognized the old man. You're here again, she said kindly, her voice low out of habit. She's in her room. The old man nodded, returning the smile, but there was something behind it that didn't reach his eyes. Thank you. The biker lingered for a second, then followed him down the hallway, their footsteps muted against the polished floor, passing doors that were slightly open, glimpses of lives paused in different ways. Someone staring at a television that wasn't really being watched, another person murmuring quietly to themselves, a nurse adjusting blankets with careful, routine movements, and the biker felt something tighten in his chest, a quiet realization settling in that this wasn't just one story, it was many, all unfolding in the same silent rhythm. They stopped outside a door marked Room 12, and the old man hesitated, his hand resting lightly on the handle, and for a brief moment he closed his eyes, as if gathering whatever strength he needed to step inside, and the biker noticed it. That small pause that spoke louder than anything else. And without thinking, he said softly, You want me to wait out here? The old man opened his eyes and looked at him, a faint, grateful smile forming. No, he said gently. It's okay. He pushed the door open. The room was simple, neat, with a window that let in the last traces of daylight, and by that window sat a woman, her frame delicate, her posture still, her gaze fixed somewhere beyond the glass, as if she were watching something only she could see. And for a moment, nothing moved, nothing changed, until the old man stepped forward. Hi, sweetheart, he said softly. The woman turned her head slowly, her eyes landing on him, and the biker held his breath without realizing it, waiting for something, recognition, warmth, anything, but it didn't come. Her expression remained blank, curious in a distant way, like someone trying to place a face they had never seen before. Who are you? She asked. The question hung in the air like something fragile that had just shattered. The biker felt it hit him hard, a sharp, unexpected ache that made him look away for a second, but the old man didn't flinch, didn't react the way most people would. Instead, he smiled, a soft, steady smile that carried more strength than anything the biker had seen from him yet. "I'm a friend," he said gently. He stepped closer, holding out the small bouquet. "I brought these for you." The woman looked at the flowers, her attention shifting, and she reached out slowly, taking them in her hands, turning them slightly, as if examining something new, and for a brief moment, just a flicker, her face softened. "They're pretty," she said. The old man nodded, his eyes glistening. "They always were." She smiled faintly, holding them for a few seconds longer before placing them down on the table beside her, exactly as he had said she would. And then, just as quickly, the moment passed, her gaze drifting back toward the window, the flowers already forgotten. The biker swallowed hard, his throat tight, unsure where to look, unsure how to stand in a moment like this without feeling like he didn't belong. But he stayed, because leaving felt wrong somehow, like walking out in the middle of something important. The old man pulled a chair closer and sat beside her, not too close, just enough to be there without overwhelming her. And for a while, he didn't say anything, just sat quietly, watching her the way someone watches something they love, even when it's no longer looking back. "It's a nice day out," he said after a moment, his voice calm, conversational. "Sun was out earlier." The woman didn't respond, her attention still somewhere else, but he continued anyway. "You always liked sunny days," he added. Said they made everything feel lighter. Another pause. "We used to go to the park on days like this," he said softly. "You'd run ahead of me, picking flowers, even if they were just weeds." The biker felt something shift inside him, something unfamiliar, as he watched the old man talk to someone who wasn't really there in the way he needed her to be, but still there enough to matter. After a few minutes, the woman turned her head again, looking at him with that same distant curiosity. "Did you need something?" she asked. The words came gently, without malice, without awareness of what they meant, and the biker had to look away again, his jaw tightening as he tried to steady himself. But the old man just shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "I just wanted to see you." And he meant it. Not in a way that expected anything back, not in a way that hoped for recognition or gratitude, but in a way that simply existed because it had to, because love didn't disappear, just because it wasn't returned the same way anymore. They stayed a little longer, the old man speaking occasionally, filling the silence with memories she couldn't hold on to, and eventually, he stood, placing the chair back carefully, as if even that small action mattered, and he looked at her one last time, his expression soft, peaceful in a way that didn't match the pain the biker knew he carried. "I'll see you next week," he said quietly. She didn't respond. He turned and walked toward the door, the biker following, and as they stepped out into the hallway, the door closing softly behind them, the weight of what had just happened seemed to settle all at once. They walked back down the corridor in silence, past the same rooms, the same quiet lives, until they reached the exit, and when they stepped outside, the cool evening air felt sharper, more real, like stepping back into a world that hadn't paused for any of it. The old man took a slow breath, looking out at the darkening sky. "Thank you," he said after a moment. The biker shook his head. "For what?" "For walking with me," the old man replied. The biker hesitated, then said honestly, "I don't think I could do what you're doing." The old man looked at him, really looked this time, and there was no judgment there, just understanding. "You could," he said softly, "if you loved someone enough." The words settled deep, heavier than anything else that had been said, and the biker found himself unable to respond, because for the first time in a long time, he felt something break through the walls he had built around himself. Something raw, something real, and as the old man turned and began walking away, his small, slow steps carrying him back into a life that demanded more strength than most people would ever understand, the biker stood there, frozen, realizing that strength wasn't loud. It wasn't force, it wasn't anything he had believed it to be, it was this. Showing up, staying, loving someone even when they no longer knew who you were. And for a long time after the old man disappeared from view, the biker didn't move, because some moments don't just pass. They stay with you, changing something quietly, permanently, in ways you don't fully understand until much later.